Good afternoon, everybody. Can you hear me? Great. I hope you're not exclusively here to get a promotion, because I'm not actually guaranteeing that, but at the very least we can promote you away from a lot of the work that some of you might be doing, which is very tedious and doesn't add that much value to your company. I'm Jens Lundgaard. I'm the CEO and founder of Brandworkz. We're an English company with a presence in America as well. I'll do about 15-20 minutes and then some time at the end for questions and answers. So this won't come as a surprise to anybody, but as a marketing person, you've got more and more channels to deal with pretty much every year. Nothing is simple anymore. You're possibly also need to be in more and more markets because of globalization. Your competitors are coming in to your market, so you have to go out and get their business as well. And that adds further complexity, mainly to do with translation and personalization, of course. And the result of that is that you got a almost exponentially accelerating number of marketing assets that you need to deal with, not just because of those first two items, but actually also because they're much easier to generate, and also certainly if you're in certain industries, you'll be refreshing, for instance, your imagery at a much quicker pace than before. If you're in clothing, it's pretty much continuous. So everything's getting more complex, no surprise there, but it does make everything more or less a nightmare to manage unless you have some software. So stop me if I'll try not to do a sales pitch. I'm going to try doing a general, a balanced presentation. Obviously, I'm from Brandworkz. We're the software manufacturer of brand management software, but I'll try and keep the sales spiel to a minimum. But often, in terms of what issues that creates, is in terms of file management. Certainly, if you are a European-wide or global company, you'll probably be using a lot of different ways of sharing files, which can get quite chaotic. Your processes may be ad hoc. That's not to say they are, but a lot of people are in the situation where they're using essentially email to create approvals and things like that, and that creates various inefficiencies. If you're in multiple markets, it can be incredibly hard to keep your brand consistency high. You might be using a number of different software applications, some for file sharing, some for workflow, some for approval, some for CMS, and that creates a certain amount of duplication of work. And also, in fact, you might be some of the people that are the bottlenecks in the companies, where if everything has to go through key individuals, not only are those individuals overworked, but obviously from a company-wide point of view, that creates some bottlenecks of a knowledge kind as well. So just out of interest, how many of you are in the marketing production? If you just, okay. And how many of you are from agencies? Okay, so about 50-50, because obviously if you're an agency as well, you'll have similar issues as if you are a brand owner. Even though if you're a brand owner and you outsource your production to your agency, obviously there's still a lot of stuff going on, and your agency will basically be bearing the brunt of that work, which you'll be charged for. So if you are in a situation where you're essentially not using software to assist you with all of this production and management, you might be feeling like the woman down in the corner. And it's also bad for business. So especially the bigger the company, the harder it gets to keep consistency high in terms of marketing material, sales material, especially if you're decentralized. So a lot of times you'll be using local markets will be using marketing material which is less effective than what's been developed in other markets, for instance. That will means that your marketing is not as effective as it could be. on an overall basis. And also, if you're duplicating work, you've got inefficient processes, then you're spending more money creating your marketing collateral, and that increases cost, of course. So it's a double whammy. Just to put it in the context of where we fit in, I've created a super simplified overview of what I think the marketing process is. So let me just get that up here. So, and sorry if you, I'm sure you already know this, but as far as I'm concerned, the foundation for everything is that you need to have a brand proposition. If you're not differentiated on something, ideally multiple things, then you're really just in a race for being the cheapest, which is not a good place to be. Once you've defined that, you need to have a core set of brand material, so that will be general images, it will be messaging, obviously price points and things like that. And that material is used for general comms and press, and it's also used by sales. And then for each campaign you do, then you need to use this proposition to then define what the campaign proposition is, because ideally that should be aligned, of course. And then you need to produce some campaign-specific material, and this resource should both inform and provide the raw ingredients to your campaigns. Then you need to execute in lots of channels, so here it goes out to 10 different channels sometimes, and then you need to analyze, and then ideally need to optimize and repeat that to keep getting better and better. And we fit into this part. So perhaps we're not as sexy as a lot of the other people here in terms of cutting edge social media and things like that, which is out here. But I would argue any day that unless you have a great proposition, great material, and the ability to stay on brand and on message, then any amount of multivariate optimization and analytics is basically just going to optimize you within a fairly ineffective framework. If you don't have the framework in the first place in terms of a strong proposition and some strong branding that can stand out, then you're not starting from a place which means that your optimization will actually provide the optimum result. That's not to say you shouldn't spend money on analytics, absolutely, but you also need to make sure that the core material and proposition is in ship shape and stays that way over time, which is actually incredibly hard. And I'm sorry if I sound like I'm talking down to you, I'm sure you already know that. So we fit into the making sure that people know about the brand proposition and also producing the material. We stop at the point of execution. It would be nice if there was a system that could do absolutely everything, but if anybody knows that, I'd certainly like to know, because I've never come across one. Possibly somebody like Teradata, IBM, but then if you really only if you got $10 million up for a system, and then it's probably because that they've merged with a lot of other vendors where it's not really integrated anyway. So I believe that it's that sorting out this is really important. So in terms of what we do, and therefore what I'll talk about, we do brand education, digital asset management, localization, briefing and approval, something called showcase, which I'll get back to, and some reporting, not reporting of the effectiveness of the marketing, but in terms of the production side. And then we couple it with, or if you're buying a software like this, let me rephrase it, you should, I believe, have at least these key functionalities in the software, and you should probably also buy it from a company that can do this sort of thing, because if you're only sold the software, it's probably not going to be that effective, because software like ours is completely useless unless you have the right content on it and it's kept up to date, and that it's probably tailored to a certain degree to your organization. So you need a certain degree of customization and management around it. So out of those 6 things, the first thing that really any employee in any organization I think should know about, apart from their own job spec, of course, is what does the brand stand for? So especially important if you're hiring a new marketing agency, of course, or if you are hiring a marketing employee, but really other types of employees and managers certainly should know what your brand proposition is. On the visual front, it should also be obvious how you want to look. It's very important these days. In fact, I think it's more important than ever how you look and how you differentiate yourself visually, because there's a glut of products. I think I saw that there's over 600 shampoos on the market. So in terms of product differentiation, it'll be incredibly hard to differentiate yourself on the product or price. So certainly in a lot of categories, they're becoming more and more crowded. So brand image and of course the marketing behind it is super critical. In terms of having a software system that actually walks the walk, if you like, that's fairly important. I think it's also a key requirement for a system like this that is tailored to what type of users you have. So there's some software vendors that are very good at catering for super users. So somebody like Cynet or North Plains are very focused on reprographics type people, and they're very good at that. If you are focused on the wider community that needs your brand material, which is the salespeople, marketing, PR, press, journalists, internal people creating PowerPoints and so forth, it's very important that it's user-friendly, because otherwise you simply just won't get the uptake. A lot of times people buy software and then they get disappointed about people not using it, even though it has the most fantastical functionality, because it's just not easy enough to use. So it's certainly critical that you buy something that's easy to use. So this is just an example of some different sites we've done, which are brands portals. So these are not public websites. These are for the marketing community and branding community and agencies that they log into, which are quite varied, but I think hopefully it'll show that they're quite on brand and also fairly intuitive. What you need to do, of course, and again, I'm speaking to the converted, no doubt, you need to make sure that everybody that's involved in marketing understands what your brand stands for and how you make it unique visually and in terms of messaging. You need a system where you can have your brand guidelines. Typically that would be with CMS or also more often and probably in conjunction with some guidelines pages, you would want to have some top-line videos. So for instance, you might not be familiar with ArcelorMittal, but it's the world's biggest steel manufacturer. So that's obviously an industry which is not traditionally very brand aware, and they're in about 40 countries. So one of their problems is that they need to make the different marketing managers in different countries aware that branding is even important in the first place, let alone what it actually is. So they created some very easy to digest videos explaining, and of course having the CEO doing that gave some more weight. Obviously there's nothing fantastical in having a CMS system that sort of to a penny, if you like, but I think the key difference is that unless you have it in the same system as all your assets, it can be difficult to get people to actually read them, because of there's no cross-linking, and it may be on some intranet, SharePoint, where external parties can't get access to it. So it's important to have them in the same place as where people go to get the actual ingredients. Digital asset management, very dry name, but unfortunately isn't a better word for it. Essentially the storage, management and distribution of your visual assets, images, videos and documents. As an example, we do that for Red Bull Racing, Infinity Red Bull Racing, I need to say now. Again, this is a kind of specialized need, I guess, because they got a huge interest in press, so they got very high volume. They got over 100,000 downloads a month. So if you have that as well, you need to be thinking about CDN integration. Sorry to technical acronyms. Content delivery network, basically a way which means that you can scale to pretty much unlimited downloads. So if you have that, then that's a consideration that you need to concern yourself with. Also, a CDN integration is great if you've got a global audience, because if you've got people out in Singapore, Australia, maybe South America, and your server is hosted here in England or America, chances are that for big high-res assets, they'll get really poor download speeds because the connectivity between here and Asia, for instance, isn't great. So then you need the sites replicated out across the globe to get fast download. So if you're a global company, you should consider a system that can have that as an add-on. Also, I think probably one of the key requirements for a DAM system is to have flexible search. So this is an example of a system we run for Canada as a tourist destination. So this is used by lots of travel agents and press people around the world, where we've tried to think about what are the common searches that people want to find images and videos for if they're promoting Canada. So I think flexibility in how to configure it is very key. Again, I said it before. So this site is no different to any of the other sites I've showed. It's purely configuration that's the difference. So again, in terms of finding a vendor, a key thing is to have the ability to make it fit for purpose in terms of the main use cases that most of the people will be coming back for over and over again. So this is just an example of where you can try and make it easy to find assets where non-creative, non-technical people often get it wrong. So in terms of logos, I'm sure if you're dealing with creative, then you'll be forevermore having requests about why do I need the Pantone versus the CMYK, or why do I need the PNG and not the EPS. So we can do, it's a very good thing to be able to do what we call decision trees, so you can ask people non-technical questions to lead them down to the right asset. So again, it's just a way of making the system more easy to use, and that should be forefront across everything you do. Of course, on a DAM system, you also need to have transcoding, a fairly tedious word. So you only want to have to upload one master of your images and videos, for instance, and then you want the system to spit out the right permutation. I guess images are fairly easy these days, but there's still a lot of manual work that goes on, possibly by yourself, to get things into the right format for the CMS, for the email campaign, for PowerPoint. So a lot of that manual work you shouldn't have to do. You certainly would want a system that can do that. If you are in multiple markets, then you will also have localization needs for translating to different languages, and obviously there'll be a certain amount of personalization that you might want to have in your marketing material. So a good place to start, if you do have what I usually call donkey work working. If you have an in-house department or a printer or an agency where you're repeatedly asking them to do things that are basically just changing a bit of text or changing an image here, you can save a lot of time and money if you have a system that can do dynamic templating. So here's an example for a big gym chain in America called Gold's Gym. One of the early customers was Arnold Schwarzenegger. That was a claim to fame. You simply tag up, in this case, an InDesign file, and then through the web interface, people can change the things that you want them to change, but they can't change the things that you don't want them to change. Same thing on the back. This is a direct mail piece. You can do the same thing with other types of items, of course, stationery, posters, things like that, where instead of having probably about 1 week lead time for having manual art working, toing and froing, get the brief, get the proof back to the person, corrections and so forth, which will probably cost the company about £500 just in the manpower time that's needed for that transaction, let alone the outworking time. You can cut that down to about 10-20 minutes. And so in terms of if you do this or one of your employees do this, that's certainly an obvious place where you should be able to promote yourself away from at least from the tedium of doing this kind of work. Maybe not in terms of your actual job, but obviously management will love it as well. Here's another example. This is again for Canada. It's a tourist destination. This is translation, same sort of thing. If you got an ad, you create a master in English typically, and then local markets, for instance France, can go in and customize it. So if you have a lot of that going on, you should have that. Brand community is not so relevant if you've got a centralized way of producing marketing material, but if you are decentralized, so if you are in, say, 5 or 10 markets and you've got marketing departments around the globe that are basically producing their own material from scratch, if you don't have a way of showcasing that to the other markets, chances are that probably up to half of the marketing material created at a local level could have been avoided by them just knowing what the other markets have created. So there's a production cost you can save, and also if there's an item that's actually been very effective in another market, obviously if that's then reused in all the other markets, then you're highly likely to get better results in terms of the actual marketing effectiveness. And you'll eradicate homegrown material that typically doesn't look as great and is not as on-brand as things that are created and have been approved centrally, or where you've cherry-picked the best items. You might even be so big that people in marketing don't even know what each other look like, so you might want to have a sort of create a sense of a community with some blogging, things like that could be nice, more of a sort of creating a sense of community. And of course, as you get more channels, you get more and more things to approve all the time. So again, there's in a lot of companies, there can be a lot of time lost in terms of ad hoc approval, where you send something out and then some people will phone back the correction, somebody will put it back in an email, somebody will use Acrobat Pro and then email it back. This guy might be doing something that's conflicting with this guy in terms of comments, and then the artworker doesn't really know which one to pick. So, and actually there isn't necessarily a process at all in some companies. So obviously you need to define a process before you can automate it. But if you can get to a point where you're defining what your steps are in terms of typically briefing of a new piece, approval, artwork creation, and approval of that, then you can automate it, put timescales around it. You can get I think a key ingredient that is that you should have a system where people can annotate on it, because that cuts down a lot of the tedium of understanding corrections, which again is a big source of time drain. And of course you can do reporting about where your weakest points are, so there may be certain steps where you keep having 3-4 iterations before things are right, which you can then pick up on and correct. And hopefully miss less deadlines, because you get an overview of what your deadlines are. Not to forget, you need a system which has a general level of configuration, so you don't need to go back to the vendor all the time for redoing permissions or setting up new sections and things like that. That kind of goes without saying. So, what is it that's going to get a promotion? Well, being able to show your company a return on investment is the simple answer. We believe we can provide return on investment in 3 areas. So we can provide revenue growth, cost reduction, and cost avoidance. In terms of revenue growth, it's quite hard to calculate. So we haven't tried to calculate that, but I think it's we fairly agreed knowledge that if you have a consistent brand these days, it's worth quite a lot. I think the research on Coca-Cola is that if they took away the branding, it would lose half its company value, which is about $100 billion. So how to calculate it? There's frankly no company in the world that can do that. There are some people that are attempting, but they don't really want to tell you the methods, which probably means that there's something they don't want to tell you. But I think it's in terms of general improvement. I think it will be. Most people will agree that if you can have better material to start your marketing from, then you're going to get better marketing. Sorry, I need to speed up. Increase in productivity, reduce time to market, and also give sales and partners better material. Then that's good for the company. More specifically, cost reduction. If anybody is interested in it, they can come to our stand afterwards or book a meeting with us. We can go through some very specific questions with you that will predict what the actual saving that we believe your company will get from this. And that's typically in the region of 5 to 10 times investment over the first year. Which I think is probably the place where you need to be in terms of a financial director really standing up and taking notice. So it's fairly common that we can demonstrate a 5 to 10 times return on investment within year one. Cost avoidance, I'll skip through that. That's more to do with risk and getting sued by Getty and things like that. So I'd rather spend the remaining time on Q&A. Just a couple of examples. Icebreaker, not very known in England, but it's a $100 million company. They do outdoor wear, which has had some very structural improvements from there. I'm not allowed to say the actual number, but they decreased ad hoc work tenfold. They had another system which was unintuitive and therefore it wasn't any uptake, so they've increased to 85 of all retailers using the system. They got 25,000 downloads a month. Imagine doing that manually. That's in fact 2 people's full-time job, so that's 100K right there per year. Also, in terms of consistency, it was very common to use out-of-date material because it was just really hard to get hold of. So now they just simply tell people to dump it at every collection, yes, and when they have a new collection, and then they download a whole new set. Gold's Gym, again, they've had a very big shift in terms of how they do things, both in terms of decreased time to market, but also, for instance, dynamic templating. They used to spend $500 to $1,000 every time somebody in these 700 locations created a homegrown piece of material. And now both the artworking and setup cost for a central template is $3,000, and that's a one-off payment. So every single time somebody customizes an artwork, they save this. So just that point is probably enough to justify the whole investment they've made. And I'll speed up. I guess it goes without saying that if you're choosing a vendor, you should have somebody with a track record. These are some of ours. And come and see us if you think that this is interesting in terms of your job.